You know that opening scene from Pixar's film Up, where we follow the life of Carl and Ellie as they grow old together? Yeah, of course you know that scene. Even people that haven't even seen the film know of its opening, due to the fact that it's just so beautiful, charming, and cripplingly sad. This is basically that, the movie. Ethel and Ernest is a 2D British animated film which focuses on the lives of a married couple, named Ethel and Ernest, where we follow them through their lives from where they meet in 1928 to when they well, until 1971. The film was initially released at the London Film Festival in 2016, but would also air on television through the BBC later that year, and would see a limited cinema release in the US in 2017. Some of you keen-eyed viewers may already be recognising the film's style, and that's because the film is based off a book going by the same name, which was originally illustrated and authored by the legendary Raymond Briggs, who, for those of you who don't know, is the same author that wrote The Snowman, Father Christmas, and of course, When the Wind Blows, which we've covered in a prior review.
Come back, you stupid bitch, and get in the shelter!
Originally, Ethel and Ernest was said to be produced by John Coates, who had previously done all the other Raymond Briggs adaptations mentioned above. But unfortunately, Coates ended up dying in 2012, so the project was passed over to Lucasfilms instead. The book and the film hold very strong similarities, with many of the book's scenes and dialogues being directly taken and put into the film.
Here, Et. Did you know if you're a Jew in Germany, you're forbidden to marry a German?
I'd hate to marry a German.
And the story itself is actually based on true events, as the character Ethel and Ernest are Raymond Briggs' actual parents, and their son is, well, Raymond Briggs himself.
I'm me?
Where we follow our characters through various points in their lives, experiencing the good times, the bad times, and of course, the sad times.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, not gonna lie, this is quite a heavy one, especially towards the end. But we'll get into that later on, and I'll make sure to give ample spoiler warning. For now, let's take a look at the plot. The film starts off as you'd expect any British film to start off, and that's with a man making a cup of tea. Did he just put in the milk first?
I think I'm gonna be sick.
The heinous man in question is actually the original author, Raymond Briggs himself, as he introduces us to the premise of the film.
But they were my parents, and I wanted to remember them by doing a picture book. And this is their story.
We're introduced to Ethel and Ernest, as the first two meet when Ernest rides his bike by and gives Ethel away from the house that she cleans for. Then later that same week, he turns up on the doorstep with some flowers.
Hello, Duck.
And the two go on a date to the cinema. God, things were so much simpler back then. Now you have to open with a funny joke, tell her that her dog looks cute, and send 3 dick pics before you can even think of getting a date. And that's if you even get swiped in the first place. The film itself doesn't have a narrative in the traditional sense, as there's no big overarching plot, no real character arcs, or even plot twists. But rather it's a slice of life kind of film, where we follow the linear progression of our characters' lives as they live in their terraced house in London. Hell, even Raymond Briggs himself says at the start that he thinks their story isn't particularly dramatic, but just wanted to honour their memory with a picture book, which I think is pretty endearing.
There was nothing extraordinary about my mum and dad, but they were my parents, and I wanted to remember them by doing a picture book.
And I know that doesn't sound particularly interesting on surface level, but it actually works surprisingly well. Mostly because Ethel and Ernest are just so likeable to watch.
Oh, Ernest.
Ethel, who starts off as a skivvy,
I was not a skivvy. I was a lady's maid.
comes from a more middle class background and takes great pride in her lifestyle, having strong morals on presentation and behaviour. She has a great emphasis of trying to project this image to the people around her, especially when it comes to their son, whom she doesn't even want wearing common boots.
Can I have boots?
Certainly not, Raymond.
There's actually one really funny moment in the film where Ethel is bragging to her neighbour about how well her son is doing in school, only for him to later be found getting in trouble with the police, to which the next door neighbour immediately rears her smug head over the garden fence and is like, "So, saw your kid got arrested earlier today?" It genuinely made me laugh.
I see your boy came home in a police van.
Yes.
And then we have Ernest. Ernest is easygoing and works as a local milkman. He has much more of a working class background than Ethel, growing up in a poor area of London where crime was rife.
The coppers won't go down there. Last one that did go, they bashed him up, then sat on him and blew his whistle to fetch more coppers.
Despite this, however, Ernest is proud of his working class roots, much to Ethel's dismay at times,
Ernest, don't sing those dreadful Cockney songs.
and thus has a much more progressive mindset with socialist ideals for working class people. He also takes a more enthusiastic interest in current affairs and the latest technology,
Very own phone.
whereas Ethel, being more traditional minded, seems to treat them with caution and concern.
Oh, quick, Ernest, it's going off.
At first when watching this, I wasn't really seeing the connection Ethel and Ernest had, as they didn't seem to have much in common, and Christ, they don't even support the same political party, which quite often leads to them making jabs at each other.
This MP's pleading that working class flats should be built with bathrooms. Labour MP, of course.
You can't blame Hitler now.
No!
Just your Labour government.
But as the film goes on and you see their story getting told, you notice it's their differences which makes them strong, as they help to complete each other. And despite their uncommon ground, they still at heart love one another.
I could have married a deep sea diver
Well, why didn't you?
because I didn't love him.
God, imagine being civil to someone who has different political views to you. What a different time it was. And it's also these differences that make them such enjoyable characters to watch, as we see their contrasting opinions on the ever-changing world around them. As along with the technology, we also get to see current events of the time through our characters' eyes, made all the more real by how they will use actual radio broadcasts,
and that consequently this country is at war with Germany.
and it's interesting to hear our characters' perspective on them when not having the appropriate hindsight.
This bloke Adolf Hitler says they're publishing his book over here. Mein Kampf it's called.
Oh, that's nice of him.
That's not to say that it's all smiles and giggles, because I'm reviewing it, so why would it be? As the film has moments throughout where the tone will suddenly drop and things will start to get very dark.
Little kiddie. All in bits. I had to.
And of course, there's the ending, which, yeah, it gets pretty heavy. Now I think we're all aware of what the ending is going to involve, but just in case you don't want to know how it goes down, I'll put a spoiler warning here and you can skip to this part of the video. There's your warning. So as well as following the lives of our two characters, we also follow their deaths. And watching this you're thinking, I know they're gonna die, but the question is, who's gonna be the first one to go? Well, it's Ethel. Ethel begins to show a decline in her physical health as she's unable to move around as much, spending much of her time laying down or being pushed around in the wheelchair.
Remember we used to bring the pram up here?
It's me in the pram now.
But it's not just her physical health that starts to suffer, but also her mental health. As Ethel lies in hospital, she's clearly showing deterioration, as she begins forgetting recent events and loses track of the days.
Oh, I hope I'll be home in time for Christmas.
It was yesterday, Mum. You had your presents yesterday.
And you can see the pain this is causing to her loved ones, with even the often jolly and optimistic Ernest breaking down and having to leave. And it's at this moment we get this line.
Who was that old man in here just now?
Oh, Mum. That was Dad.
And that's where the film really hits you. All those events we just watched with our two characters and what they've been through, the laughs they've had, the struggles they've had, and the love they've had, it's all gone. And that is absolutely gut-wrenching. After Ethel passes away, we then follow Ernest as he carries on living by himself. And it's horrible to watch, as he continues to lay the table for two and will frequently be sat there talking to himself. And in the same way Ernest is feeling the void from Ethel, so too are we the audience. Even the music itself is mostly silent for these last few moments. One day while sat at home eating soup, Ernest suffers from a sharp pain in his stomach, and the scene cuts to where we see him passed away in the hospital, in what is a pretty eerie shot. In fact, this last section of the film has a few uncomfortable images in it. We cut to their son Raymond and his partner as they walk around the now empty home, where we gaze upon a tree in the garden, the same tree that Raymond originally planted many years ago.
What's that, son?
Where the film ends and the credits roll. And that's Ethel and Ernest, a beautiful film which offers us laughter, sorrow, and charm. I think a lot of that charm comes from the fact that the author has done this as a tribute to his parents, and though the earlier parts of the film would be more based off speculation, the parts where Raymond himself is getting older, you can tell would be based off actual interactions he had with his parents.
Dad, when you come home from work, why don't you wash in the bathroom?
Oh, I couldn't, son. Not in the bathroom.
Oh, Dad.
And you can see how those actual interactions would have helped him piece together moments from his parents' past.
Son, it's the sort of place I always dreamed about.
I know, Dad.
I've always dreamed of a cottage in the country.
I do want to warn you, however, that this film is a slow burner, and even though there are scenes of dramatic action, the majority of it is very grounded. And because this film is based off true events, there are some plot points you think that will lead somewhere, but actually don't. Such as their son Raymond joining the army. Nothing really comes of this. He's not killed or injured, nor does his personality alter. And then you have Raymond's partner Jean,
Mum,
who gets diagnosed with schizophrenia, and again, nothing really comes of it. There aren't even any real side characters that feature all too much either. For example, there's this one guy named Arthur, who appears to be good friends with Ernest, yet we've never seen him before this moment. We hear that his son has died in the war, and then he's never mentioned again in the film. But that's not what this film was going for, and honestly, you never get the feeling that this film is lacking because of it. Because you get so much charm from the couple themselves, and get joy seeing them build their lives throughout the film. I think a big part of that is down to the voice actors, who do well to play the characters in both their younger and older years. Brenda Belthin plays Ethel, giving her that soft, gentle tone, along with a bit of fire when needed.
You wicked, wicked boy! I could kill you!
And Jim Broadbent absolutely nails Ernest, giving him that bright and energetic tone, yet can still pull off a great depth of sadness when required.
I'm sorry, mate. I'm sorry, I forgot.
But you know, despite these sad moments, there are actually a lot of funny moments throughout, such as the political humour I mentioned earlier.
I'm leaving, Mum. Shush, dear.
And quite a few tongue-in-cheek moments too.
Good springs, look. Newlyweds need good springs. Come and try it out, darling.
I think one of my favourites is this scene here, where one of Ernest's customers is complaining that his wife is getting a little bit too full on. So asks if Ernest wouldn't mind sleeping with her while he's out at the football.
You'd be doing me a favour.
Yeah, Ernest politely refuses the proposal, and they end on this line.
No hard feelings.
No, me neither.
I think that's honestly got to be the best boner joke that I've heard in any film. Speaking of boners, let's gush about the animation, because I also really like the animation in this film. It does its best to remain faithful to Raymond Briggs' classic sketch-like style, and I think it does a pretty decent job, even with the modern day digital inking technique. And when you consider that this isn't the usual company that did his previous adaptations, I think they did pretty well. They also utilised some 3D animation for certain objects, which, to be fair, are actually integrated pretty well, for the most part. And despite the 3D animation and digital inking, this film was still done using individual hand-drawn frames, over 67,000 to be precise. So yeah, credit where credit's due, they did put a solid effort into the animation, and the watercolour style backgrounds fit beautifully. The musical score is also a highlight, and features pieces that are relevant to the time, where we get some big band swing in the 30s, Vera Lynn during the war, and some jazz in the 60s. I like how they managed to also include the eerie church choir as Ethel lays there in hospital, which conveniently happens to be there because there's people watching carol singers on the TV. And of course you have a brilliantly fitting original piece by Paul McCartney titled In the Blink of an Eye, which plays over the film's end credits. So yeah, that's Ethel and Ernest, a film which I highly recommend you go to check out. Like I said, it's a bit of a slow burner, but it offers plenty of laughter, emotion, and charm throughout, and finishes with a final act that you won't be forgetting anytime soon.